So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Mary Beth Smith, and I'm so glad that you're interested in my quilt. And I've been quilting for 37 years. I started out with a friend who showed me how to do everything by hand. So fast forward a few years, many years, and this is a result of doing things by hand and by machine. So this is a quilt. It's a copy of a quilt that's in the museum in Vermont, the Shelburne Museum. It was first made by a woman, a farmer's wife, and her husband went off to war during the Civil War. So while he was away, she made this quilt. She probably used a lot of materials that came from shirts, pajamas, pants, blouses, dresses, that kind of thing. So there was a woman who saw this quilt in the Shelburne, and she asked if she could chart it. So or graph it, I guess the word is graph he would use. So she graphed this quilt, wrote a book about this woman and this quilt, and sold the book to the public, to people like me and a friend that I had. So my friend decided to make this quilt. She had already done a year's worth of work on it. So she talked me into it. She said, you don't have to buy any material. I've bought lots and lots of material. And as you can see, you don't need very big pieces. And she already had the white background. So I started, and she had already done quite a few, so she was able to help me. And then the other ones we worked on together. And a lot of them are done by hand, and it's very tedious. It took a long time. It took Terry and I 5 years to make all the squares and sew them together. Then it took me about a year and a half to quilt. Like for instance, all the way down here, all the way across here, quilt all inside these. So that's how long it took. So the pattern is called Around the World. So this is the center, and if you look, you'll see this is yellow. This is the purple, going around the world, come down here. Then we had red, come down here to the reds, and go around the world. And so each color is around the world. So a lot of these are done in different modes. You have to cut, first you have to make all these points, and they have to be done just perfectly. That's really hard to do. One of the hardest things to make were these diamonds. And of course they're not perfect, and the other difficult parts are when you're doing these little tiny pieces here. I did this 3 times to try to find 3 different materials, and I did it 3 times to try to make sure that each one was the same width. That is so hard to do, very difficult. See how you had to get those little tiny pieces in there? That was so difficult to do. That was even more difficult. By the time I got to the triangles, I really didn't want to do a lot of hand quilting. So I only did 1/4 inch here. All of these have been hand quilted. So we used a saucer to make these. There's this piece that comes around, and we didn't know how we were going to make that. One morning she calls me, it's about 7 in the morning. She said, oh, I just got up and I realized I have a tablespoon. That shape, we'll use that tablespoon as our pattern. We needed a pattern. And it worked out just fine. So I'm glad that you've come to see it. When you look around, do you have a favorite one that you've noticed that you like? Do some intrigue you more than others?
Just say some of the lighter pink patterns.
Yeah.
Really intrigue me. I like that color.
Oh, but I do like this basket. I think that is really, I don't know, I like the basket, and I like the way I quilted it. So that's one of my favorites also. And I like the 4 corners that she designed. She designed those 4 corners, that lady. That's
wow.
4,714 pieces are in this quilt. And it was 2010. And this says, I think that says Mary Elizabeth Smith. So I seem to have done a lot of talking now. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask me?
I'm very interested. What got you into quilting and why you've continued to do it over the years? What do you get out of it mostly?
Oh, that's a good question. See, I worked with this friend of mine, Alice Caldwell, and I had seen quilts that she had made. She took me to her house and showed me quilts. And I said, you know, I think I'd like to do that. So she said, okay, I'll teach you. And she said, don't think big, think small to start with. She said, think of something small that you could hang on the wall. So that's what I did. And she helped me get started with that. And once I got started and once I made it, the wall hanging, then she said, now you'll make a big quilt. So I made a big quilt, and she said, keep it very simple. So I did, and I hand quilted it, and I was hooked. It's just something that I really enjoyed doing. It was very relaxing, but I did enjoy the challenge of putting it together. And then the big quilt that I made for my husband and I for our bed, and it's still in use today after all these years. And that was, we didn't do any machine work on it in those days. We started out doing everything by hand. We cut all our patterns by hand. We had, she used cardboard to make the patterns, and then you'd have to trace the pattern onto your material. So it was kind of something that I just really took to, and I've been doing it ever since and enjoyed every minute.